elimination bracket. It means you have to lose twice before you do head home. As you can see, we'll be kicking things off with Deathsie versus HelloLeeroy, Big Ben Ding Dong versus Cold Hands, Toast Monster versus Dan SWF, and the classes that are going to be brought. Of course, they are closed deck lists. Neither opponent knows what the other is going to be bringing, but both Warlocks banned away, then Darok. I mean, just looking at that general lineup,
showing us his beautiful jazz hands there as we jump into game one. And we see from both players a Jade Druid to get things going, which in some ways very much surprises me, because bringing a Jade Druid here, but banning Warlock kind of seems counterintuitive in a way.
Yeah, if you told me 3 months ago that we'd be casting a Jade Druid mirror at the start of this, I'd be like, yeah, of course we are. And then it's like, suddenly Jade Druid's taken a bit of a back seat in recent times, but starting to pop up again with these armor-heavy builds because they can take on the priests.
Does that just show the power of Warlock at the moment, though? It's kind of a respect ban because Warlock is just performing so well.
The weird thing for me is I think Priest is easily the best deck. If you don't think Priest is the best deck, either log out now or keep listening and learn something. But Warlock is the deck that is the most oppressive when it comes to building a lineup. So if you want to put any aggressive decks in your lineup, the Warlock just chews them up and spits them out. So you kind of have to ban the Warlock, even though the Priest is better.
Deathsie chuckling away there as he unfortunately reveals the information to his opponent that he does have the Spellstone in hand because of the double animation on the hero power. But Leeroy will probably have to return the favor at some point soon. And going back to your point about Warlock, I think in this particular instance, obviously the Jade Druid would have a decent shot up against a control Warlock, but if it were a Q block, I don't actually believe it's that favored in a lot of ways, because if you can hit Skull of the Minari early on, start getting those Doom Guards out, you can apply a very, very respectable amount of pressure. So bringing this Druid to have a great shot against Raza Priest, and then a couple of aggressive decks like Rogue and Paladin to bolster it up seems like a respectable strategy to get things going.
Yeah, and you do lose those Jade Spirits when you play this weird sort of armory version of Druid, which means that your Jades don't get as big, so you don't fight back quite as quickly.
That's a very good point.
So we're seeing the early exchanges. It's just typical Druid stuff, though. This is going to be about who can get Ramp and who can get Jades. We might have said that before in a cast or two.
Just the thing, it doesn't change. After every expansion, it still seems to be the same idea. But has the Spellstone changed anything in the mirror matchup for you guys?
In the mirror, not particularly. I mean, the fact that it's replacing Wrath in some lists means that it's lowering the amount of draw, but it's, you know, it's not put in for this matchup. It's, as you said, pretty much the same as ever.
Yeah, which means that actually if they're lowering the amount of draw, it's going to raise the variance a little bit. Like, you've both got a Wrath to cycle in your deck, you've got more chance of everyone drawing the stuff they want. But if you draw this Spellstone, it's almost a dead draw in the mirror.
Right. So here for Leeroy, some fairly respectable options over the next few turns. Probably doesn't want to be shuffling Jade Idols back quite yet because he doesn't have that all-important ultimate infestation in his hand. So I don't expect to see that coming down this turn. But as soon as he does find that, after drawing some cards with branching paths, then maybe we could start to see the shuffling back in of the Jade Idols. Because after you've played the UI, 1 mana anything, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5 is very respectable.
Interesting though that he is choosing to armor up rather than draw a second card.
I mean, it's just to kill off the Fandral there, isn't it, with the...
Yeah. I
suppose it's worth considering leaving it up, but the Nourish just being a blowout victory for your opponent, I think I prefer this line of play.
Yeah, Nourish is the important card, because Fandral now you can leave up sometimes. That's why I was pointing it out, because there's no Wrath.
Yes.
Obviously, for those who haven't played much Branching Paths, it's a choose 2, not a choose 1, so that doesn't work with Fandral. Shame that.
I don't think that's a shame.
Is it a shame?
Is it a shame? I think that would be ridiculous.
On the phone to Blizzard saying, oh, excuse me.
Excuse me.
Oh, you've got a personal hotline now, have you?
Yes, I do. It's attached to the banter bell, actually.
You flip it upside down.
Yeah, flip it upside down. Ring it twice, and there we have Ben Brode.
Well, go show it.
Later.
Okay. We're waiting now.
So very nice pickup here for Leeroy. The Aya is what you want to be getting down a little bit earlier against in the mirror, because it's just applying more pressure, a little bit stickier, and you don't need to be protecting your own health total because of the insane amount of armor gain that both of these decks seem to have access to, especially as both players have the ability to go Malfurion in the next couple of turns.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because we're not used to big Jades being 6/6s, 7/7s. It's going to take a while for those Jades to actually get up to any sort of size at all, while both players are busy just drawing cards and armoring up. Sounds like Control Warrior.
I mean, it's kind of become the premier armor class at the moment. Obviously, Control Warrior is not really a thing at the moment unless you're Fibonacci and just somehow manage to make it work despite every rule of logic in the universe.
Yeah, we don't really want any of those Fibonacci series here today.
Does this tell us anything about the meta of the tournament that's coming up, though, the fact that we're seeing 2 Jade Druids, or is that something that we should have expected coming into it? Because, I mean, I was hoping for more aggro Druid, personally, just because I think it's very popular as of late, but...
This is the safe pick.
Yeah.
This is the safe pick. This is the pick that gives you a great chance against Priest. You've got to leave Priest up. We discussed that. But I do feel that if somebody has put aggro Druid in their lineup, which isn't the safe pick, they are going to take those Paladins down, assuming they are Murloc Paladins, but I mean, he's going to rip them apart.
Just look at what's going on at the moment. I don't think... I mean, against aggro Paladin as opposed to Murloc Paladin, I think this deck's got a very good shot. Against Murloc Paladin, it's a little bit rockier because they can make such big boards with the Gentle Megasaur and the Murloc War Leader. But just look at what's going on here. The 2 Ironwood Golems here for Deathsie against a Paladin would be absurdly powerful. But just kind of a stalemate for the moment until that Jade train can start rolling for both players.
The interesting thing to me is these are 2 players that we've built as, you know, they're going to bring spectacular, crazy, idiotic decks, and they're just bringing the good stuff. Both of them have knuckled down and said, okay, I'm going to win with good decks and show that I'm good at this game, rather than, hey, look at me, I can put a silly card in my deck and lose.
I think Falcone approached me before this series started, and he said that he spoke to Deathsie earlier, and Deathsie said, I'm playing a bad deck in a bad selection of a lineup that I shouldn't have brought. And what can you take from that? Like, is that just a lie? Because, I mean, Jade Druid is something that, well, we were half expecting.
So what's the bad deck?
Exactly.
Might be the Priest. There's a lot of weird priests out there. There's
true.
Spiteful Summoner Priest, I would label personally, I'll be unpopular for this, as a bad deck.
Okay.
Not bad because the deck is particularly awful, but bad because you have banned your own Highlander Priest when you play Spiteful Summoner Priest.
Yeah.
Which is something you don't ever want to do. The combo Priest is another matter. If he's brought that, then that's actually not a bad deck, I don't think at all.
As for the moment, though, for Deathsie, he just needs to kind of figure out how he wants to best maneuver his draw cards, because if both of these players can draw through their entire deck very quickly, then in the later stages of the game, cards like Nourish can be very strong, obviously, to shuffle your Jade Idols, draw them, and play them again. But it's probably not actually going to be reaching that stage, because the breaking point is going to be one player finding UI. And obviously, for the moment, they don't know that the opponent doesn't have that.
Yeah, I'm cackling because where those UIs, when I play against Druid, they've always got UI on turn 4 or 3, whenever they play it. Feels really quick whenever it is.
But it is interesting when they're just not available, because it is going to be, for the moment, who can pull ahead on board in terms of tempo the most. And that's definitely looking to be Leeroy at the moment, because he's had the liberty to play the Malfurion already, which Deathsie has not had the time to do. And also, Leeroy's got a couple of powerful Jades to get going with the Behemoth and the Idol.
Yeah, he does seem to have like just the advantage in every area apart from the mana, but that doesn't seem to be relevant because Deathsie's only able to play 1 card a turn anyway, so he's not being able to abuse his mana advantage.
There we go. So for Leeroy now, things get a little bit more interesting, because very often I have found players using Nourish for basically the 1 mana crystal on turn 8 to get themselves to UI a little bit quicker. But looking at that, he would have 5 mana crystals left over. Which, you know, you can make some stuff happen, like Swipe and Idol doesn't look all too bad at the moment. Actually, Swipe's pretty good here.
Yeah, he went into this turn, this was going to take a long time, expecting to have to Nourish for cards to find his UI, and suddenly he finds the UI. Now this Nourish is a dead card if he doesn't use it for ramp, but if he uses it for ramp, just so he can get the UI off that 1 turn quicker, then his rest of his turn isn't that great, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I mean, dead card's a bit strong, because after he's played Ultimate Infestation, he'll start cycling very, very quickly. And then all of a sudden, Jade Idol becomes a lot stronger. But doesn't think it's quite worth it here.
Yeah, he's actually going to hold on to it to get those extra Jade Idols at the end of the game, by the look of it. I imagine this, if he's not nourishing now, I don't reckon he'll nourish until turn 1,000,000.
Yeah, I agree.
I think these are the matchups that favour HelloLeeroy as well. In this particular series against Deathsie, if we're honest, HelloLeeroy, in theory, is a better player. So when we get these matchups where there is a longer game, you have a lot more to think about, HelloLeeroy is going to be feeling a lot more comfortable. If we look back across the Premiership season, Deathsie had a lot of these games where he just drew very well and the game kind of played itself. Now we're going to really see how Deathsie faces pressure like this. And I know he's capable of performing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leeroy also is one of the best strategic players we have. The reasons he loses sometimes are because he does dumb stuff. But he's going to have time to settle in as well. I mean, whoever wins this game, this is going to be a long game of Hearthstone, and Leeroy's going to have time to actually get himself comfy on that stage, which is something that he does suffer from.
And still from Leeroy, that last turn, it's just so worth thinking about, because yes, he got an extra 3-5 on the board now, and it's Vandal, obviously, so the effect can be very strong. But Fandral is very often best saved for the super late game, for the exact combo of Fandral idle into Nourish, and then you make an absolutely disgustingly massive board.
Yeah, so interesting to see where he's going with that, and it's like buses.
I mean, I guess he can just do it here. He doesn't really want to play the Nourish, though. He just wants to dump cards from his hand, so you're going to be Behemoth instead, I would imagine, this turn.
How are they like buses, Neil? Because my experience with buses is they never turn up at all.
Yeah, then
so
they come to it at a time.
they come to it. Yeah, see, that's always awkward, isn't it? Do you get on the first one, though, or the second one?
Second one, because everyone else gets on the first one, because that's silly.
So Leeroy is going to be playing the Nourish here just to get it in combination with the Fandral, which I disagreed with quite a lot, because you just want to be pulling ahead on board as much as you can against the Druid, because they don't have the regain tools. He managed to get the Arcane Tyrant, which obviously is a big thinking point for this line of play, but I think it was just more important to get the Jades rolling quicker.
I guess he wanted to get the value out of the Fandral while he could. Like you were saying, you're going to do it at the end of the game. If you're going to do it, it's better to do it at some point than not at all, is his line of thinking, maybe. Yeah,
and it's also worth saying, if he draws either Arcane Tyrant or Jade Idol there, it's pretty good. Because then he can draw a whole bunch more Jade Idols with the Ultimate Infestation. So there was quite a bit of potential upside with that line of play, but just playing the Jade Behemoth, I mean, you're playing out a Jade anyway that turn, so...
And Deathsie just hasn't... You pointed it on about turn 6 when Deathsie was 2 mana ahead, but not getting anywhere. Deathsie just hasn't had the time to get this Malfurion down.
Very good point.
He's been slightly behind on board the whole time, and Leeroy hasn't actually played the Ultimate Infestation yet, and he's still pulled ahead. Like, we can see he's there, so in our mind, he's miles ahead. But even if you just look at the board, forgetting those Ultimate Infestations, Leeroy has sort of ground this out into a slight lead anyway.
And I think that's what Leeroy should be pushing. His advantage is that he's always been a little bit ahead on board this game, so Deathsie hasn't had the ability to play his powerful cards, which is why I was looking at the Behemoth a bit more, because if he missed either the Idol or the Arcane Tyrant off that draw with the Nourish, then he's not pushing his strong board advantage, which he has to be doing.
One of Leeroy's weaknesses in this game is sometimes his negativity, says me, the most optimistic guy in the world, in that he will be assuming every turn that Deathsie will draw Ultimate Infestation.
Right, yeah.
And that can affect his play sometimes. Because he knows it's not in hand, so he should be playing as if it's not going to be drawn. But I know that Leeroy will assume it's going to be picked up.
So now killing off the Fandral, looking to be very important, because the Wrath was picked up. The Wrath.
That wasn't in his deck, we thought.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to point out as well. I was a little bit confuzzled, because I believe everything you say, Darragh, to be honest.
I'm not saying it's been cut unanimously, it's just
No, and now we've got to find out what has been cut.
Yeah, something had to have disappeared.
Very true. I mean, there's a fair amount of room in the list at the moment with Jade Spirits going. There's a few tech slots. I do expect, I was going to say sometimes we see 1 Plague in Jade Druids, but I expect to see 2 in this tournament.
Yeah, in this tournament, if you're banning out the Warlocks.
Definitely.
Etc. We talked about all the aggro. Because that just beats Paladin. We just go, hey, spreading Plague. Oh. GG, let's set him up for another one.
Yeah, and so now the perfect way to fill out the mana with the Branching Paths. Probably just going to be looking for draw as much as possible. If he's going for armor, it's the time-old problem of healing in Hearthstone is it's just delaying the problem. You need to be finding a way to fight back a little bit more effectively. Wow. The third option on the paths. The road less traveled.
Yeah, the only issue I have with this, I guess he's got the Nourish and the Wild Growth already, so he doesn't necessarily think he needs the card draw. That's his reasoning there.
He has to actually play those. Like, he doesn't. It's not about the amount of draw he has, it's the time in which he has to get that draw down, which he does not have access to.
Whoa. Yeah, because there is no long game where you're sat where Deathsie is right now. This is just Leeroy is going to batter you with this board that you can see.
Yeah. And what's he hoping to draw after this? So he weakens the board with 3 attack minions. Great. And then after that, Primordial Drake, another Spreading Plague. I'm not really sure what he's aiming to do in this instance. But to be fair, he probably couldn't have drawn anything too impressive off of the Branching Paths anyway, because he is just so far behind now.
Yeah, I mean, look at that hand we can see from Leeroy. This game is over. We know, but Deathsie's got to play on, because he doesn't know how good Leeroy's hand is. He's got to sit there and hope it's a handful of 3/6s that can't attack.
Yeah.
Because you've only got 18 armor.
And that's just not going to do it. I haven't even counted it up, but it's probably lethal here for Leeroy on the following turn with Swipe and the hero power as well. And even if it isn't, he can keep pushing that board advantage, which is what he's done so consistently throughout this game. I go back again to the option where he had Nourish or Jade Behemoth. Could have maybe pushed that advantage a bit more consistently because he was relying on what he drew off the top of the deck. But it worked out very well for him anyway, and it meant that also his card economy was incredibly high throughout this game.
Yeah, and he still managed to find time to do stuff at the same time, which is good use of the mana, showing why he is one of the best players in the UK.
And do we think without Ultimate Infestation, this still probably would have been HelloLeeroy's game anyway? Or was that UI draw so impactful?
It actually worked out in this game that it wasn't the most impactful thing in the world because he went for the Nourish with the Fandral on board anyway, so he gained a bit of extra. Well, the crystals didn't actually matter because he was on turn 9, but he kept his card economy nice and high, drew the Arcane Tyrant, and obviously the Ultimate Infestation helped it, but because Deathsie didn't find it either, I think
that's what would have been crucial. If Deathsie had drawn it and Leeroy hadn't, then it would have been impactful. But I think the way it went, Leeroy managed to get his Malfurion doing good work, and Deathsie didn't seem to find a turn where he could sort of sit and play it. I think maybe there may have been a turn in there where he could have just gone, you know what, I take a beating for one turn, I play Malfurion, I level this up, but Leeroy pushing the advantage. He did get the UI just to make sure and takes that 1-0 lead.
Yeah, and it's probably a good time to remind everyone of the format of this tournament as well.
A lot of sense because he's expecting a lot of Paladin to be around. And so because of the fact that it does so well against those decks, in my experience with cards like Backstab, SI, Patches, and Keleseth, obviously, I feel like he can lock down those aggressive mirrors very, very nicely.
Yeah, I mean, one strategy now is you ban Warlock so your Rogue survives. You let Priest win because that's what Priest does. And then you find your 2-on-2 and Rogue beats the Paladin. That's a great position to be in. And Rogue can sometimes, I mean, the reason you don't ban the Priest is that all of your decks can sometimes find a way against Priest. Priest can suffer from occasional bad draws, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Whereas Warlock just doesn't. Like, Warlock just destroys Rogue.
Well, that's the benefit of Warlock, is you can just pretty much at any time have exactly what you want.
Rogue versus Druid then. I mean, looking at Deathsie's hand, it's a relatively slow one. There's no wild growth, there's no ramp.
Relatively, yeah.
There are no
horribly slow
Jade Idols or anything. So is there a chance for HelloLeeroy just to kind of go out of control here?
He can't really capitalize on it for the moment, though. Obviously, Captain on 3 is fantastic, and if he can pick up a couple of other Pirates or Prince Keleseth with the Shadow Step, then it's looking a lot more juicy, because now pulling a 4/4 Patches from your deck as opposed to a 2/2, as Leeroy tells his opponent, what are you going to do?
Yeah, Deathsie's actually laughing about it, so he knows what's coming. Another weakness of Leeroy when it gets to the head-to-head stage, actually, is he does sort of tell you what he's got by his face a lot of the time.
Well, that's the thing. Online, he almost speaks to the webcam, doesn't he? And he does have to sometimes just keep back his feelings. Of course, in this situation, it doesn't really matter. But
so what we're going to see now from Leeroy over the next few turns is how he chooses to play around Spreading Plague.
That's the biggest
What's he going to do? It looks like he's going to get these small guys on the board to trade them off before the Spreading Plague is played. Other than that, it should be a decent cruise. But it is going to be interesting to see if he goes too wide, the Plague comes out. That could be a problem for him.
That is absolutely the thing I was going to be bringing up, that you have to be most conscious of here, because obviously on this turn you can be, you need to be making sure you can kill off whatever comes down from Oaken Summons, because if it's Fandral, you really want to be making sure you kill that off. And now he absolutely has the ability to do so, even without the blooming Keleseth buff pulling out Patches. Just Backstab SI would be very strong here. But he does kind of want to be trading away those smaller minions, as you said, to be less vulnerable to Plague.
Yeah, this is getting really good efficiency out of a card he didn't even really want to play. Like, this Elemental really was going to sit in a handle game.
Absolutely.
So maybe use it as an activator. He's managed to find a way to use it as a bit of damage, as a trade, and still get it out of the way before that Nightmare coin into Spreading Plague that he's no doubt expecting with his outlook on life.
And he's doing exactly that. Love these trades from Leeroy, making sure he's got a nice beefy board that can trade very nicely against Plague, especially after the Scale Bane comes down, because that is the real Plague's worst nightmare, because not only can it take out a Scarab itself, it makes sure that another minion can also do the same.
That Keleseth is so important, right? It's just done.
Yeah. And Leeroy showing he's got a fairly not super light deck, because Cobalt Scalebane, I've seen it making its way out of a couple of rogues, although for the most part, it still seems to be hovering around.
What's lurking in its place these days? Anything in particular?
I think I've just seen a few players with slightly more aggressive decks, with Cold Blood making its way back in, things like that. But I agree, for the most part, Scalebane is still lurking around in there.
I mean, the main reason that Scalebane was so amazing is because it just gets straight through Dragonfire Potion.
Yeah.
But now there's Psychic Scream, maybe that's the reason people are starting to move it out.
Yeah,
be a thing.
Definitely. I mean, it was so powerful that people were putting blooming Holy Fire in their Raza Priests back in the day.
Back in the day, December
3 weeks ago.
2017. back before everybody made New Year's resolutions to never play Dragons again.
You got to cut me some slack. I'm quite young, so I've never really had a day to be back in.
It's only your, what, 21st year on the planet?
It is indeed.
Oh, it's so sweet.
It's, in comparison to Lorinda's, that's quite a little bit of time on the planet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where are you at, Neil? 50?
Yeah, something like that.
That's my one. That's my one for the whole tournament.
Really?
I won't make an old joke.
No more.
Hey,
no.
Dan, guess what? Neil's old.
My gosh. they've caught me.
To the Premier.
They've worked it out.
And this is just exactly what Leeroy wants to be doing. Now, the one card that he could potentially be weak to in this matchup, obviously being Spreading Plague, is not really something he needs to be too worried about. And if he can just find anything reasonable to play in the next couple of turns, he basically just needs to dodge the one backstab and the one shadow step, and he should be in a perfectly reasonable spot to take this game.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about playing on that Spreading Plague because that's sort of the only point of interest in this particular massacre. And he's done it perfectly. Just been these high attack minions on the board the whole time. And Lich King's just there if it does all go wrong. For all of us.
For everyone.
And it's incredible to see Keleseth still having the power. I mean, speaking of power creeps, Corridor Creeper turns up as well. That has been the standout of this expansion. But Keleseth kind of showed up quite late in the previous expansion.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that it's still here, if I'm honest. I thought it might have changed a little bit, but it's still working for HelloLeeroy.
I mean, we see its supreme power is kind of lowering, I would say, in a lot of these aggressive decks, because obviously it would make sense to play it in a Call to Arms aggro paladin, because if you can pull out buffed minions from your deck with Call to Arms, that's absurd. But it turns out that the Juggler and the Direwolf is just a little bit more powerful to pull out from that, both if you pull it from Call to Arms and without. And even Amnesiac making a Zoo list right at the start without Keleseth with the Vulgar Homunca S instead.
Oh, wow. But yeah, Keleseth was an interesting card. It got... I can't carry on. Gaskin's lost it.
I'm out. I nearly hit the banter bell as well.
Was that almost worthy?
Yeah, but it was too much of an inside joke, I feel.
Yeah.
It's sort of.
I mean, that's kind of the one that we were just supposed to ignore and let it slip under the radar, but thanks for making a huge deal out of my rubbish joke.
So what's happening? Where are we?
HelloLeeroy made some interesting trades, just so we could get Corridor Creeper on the board, is what happened, Neil. Certainly from watching HelloLeeroy play Tempo Warrior yesterday on my account when he boosted me, which obviously is illegal and I shouldn't mention it, he was trading a lot to make sure he could get the Corridor Creepers on the board rather than going face and just doing as much damage as possible.
You can do that at rank 15, though.
You can, apparently, yeah. He got me up to a good 12. Yeah, I was very happy with that.
Well done.
And so
you get a card back for that? I've never been there.
Maybe.
Okay.
Deathsie obviously trying to get himself up to an ultimate infestation as quickly as he possibly can, but for Leeroy here, the pickup of SI7 agent is perfectly good. He doesn't even need to play it, to be honest, but he's going to anyway because it's basically nothing against Spreading Plague because it just kills off the Scarab that's summoned against it, and that is basically the only thing that can stop it.
Well.
Yeah, well, that's the upside of playing a 3-mana 5/5, yeah. But like, what could go wrong? I suppose it gives him a victory against Malfurion is the thing.
I've got nothing to say at all. Interesting point here because this is concealed deck list and it's double elimination talking of game 3 because game 2 looks like it's got a bit of an issue as in it's over. Deathsie might well queue up Druid again so he doesn't give any information away about his lineup for the next round.
Absolutely. I mean, concealing deck lists is really important. The mulligan can make or break a game sometimes, let's be honest. Like, if you think you're going up against a Control Warlock and it's actually a Zoolock, for example, you can get absolutely punished. So that would be a very good strategy from Deathsie.
And that is actually something we've talked about, is bring the zoo, because the only person who doesn't ban your Warlock is the one who can't cope with zoo. And suddenly, hey, I've got this zoo floating around.
I definitely expect to see that from a couple of players floating around here, because you can just, hey, make it through to the semis or the finals, and all of a sudden, no one's realised that you've actually been playing zoo the whole time.
Yeah, he's just been banned the whole time. It's going to be hilarious to see.
And so here, Deathsie giving it all that he's got, and can stay alive for the moment.
Swashbuckler usually says no to that. Something will happen.
You've got 8 mana here and you want to play Swashbuckler.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in theory, you could Swashbuckler to try and find lethal. Like, I was
got
thinking
what he
the
was
same
going
thing.
for.
Old
I know you were
Leroy
thinking
would
the
have
same
gone for
thing.
Swashbuckler. He's let us down. He's grown up. He's playing sensibly.
Boo-hoo-hoo. This is the new Leroy who plays Lich King on 8. Like,
Just a 10-10 Lich King
just
as well.
a 10-10
The
Lich.
new Leroy who potentially wins games at final, something
Yeah.
that he hasn't been able to achieve before.
Yeah, in any top 8 at all in this ESL Premierships in the first 4 seasons, this will be his first win. If he gets this done, he's only going to be 2-0 up. I've got a feeling he's been 2-0 up before, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, some of the pictures we've seen of him after losses, I remember the one black and white photo of him with his head in his
Head
hands,
on the desk. Yeah.
on the desk, probably close to tears. He probably doesn't want me to remind him about it, but I will every time.
And we do, yeah.
'Cause it was
repeatedly.
glorious. Because he was a very cocky young man in that season.
Now he's a very cocky middle-aged man.
Everyone's middle-aged compared to you.
Nobody's a child.
Everyone is a child.
And I'm grown up.
I mean, I think he might actually literally be the middle of your age. So.
Thanks.
But yeah, I mean, he's got lethal already here. I don't know if he realizes it with Death and Decay, but he's given it a good old go anyway, and he's going to win with Nash off the Swashbuckler. This, for all players who may not be UK natives and don't know a whole bunch about Leroy, this is him through and through.
And it's actually important to see him enjoying himself. He hasn't looked in any of the other top 8s like he's enjoying himself at any point. He just looked a mess in some of those.
Well, if we look back, I mean, was it Season 1 when he came into it as first seed, and there was...
They're getting the creeper out as aggressively as possible, and now he is left with what is quite clearly a Kazakus Priest. With the tech that we were talking about beforehand, we were expecting a fair amount of Galaka Crawler in this deck just to deal with some of the aggressive matchups. But I think because it is already, we can see, teched to deal with aggro, this is going to be a difficult matchup for Leroy.
Going to be difficult, but not impossible. That Radiant Elemental will sit in his hand for the next 25 turns, and then he will launch a barrage of stuff at Deathsie and see if it's enough. He'll be able to do something like 58 damage in a turn. So Deathsie will probably be on something like 70 health.
Is it ever worth throwing out the Radiant Elemental just to maybe get the buff on it with the Cabal Talon Priest, start pushing some mid-range damage?
Unless you have an absolute nut hand with maybe a Kazakus as well, where you can get a +4 potion. Even then, these days, I don't think it is. I think you just keep the Radiant the whole game. You save your coin, you save your zero-cost spells as much as possible, as much as is realistic, and then you just launch over 2 turns. And another way you can win is maybe try to stick your Velen on the table. So use your stuff to remove things on turn 20, then play Velen and just hope it stays there so you get 2 turns worth of power.
So is this matchup similar to kind of the old Freeze Mage versus Control Warrior scenario where there can just be so much armor gain from the Druid that the priest can just not do anything but send 28 damage or so to face and then say, oh, there's another 20 or so I still need to get through?
Yeah, but the difference is now is that the Druid has taken so much aggro out of its deck that the priest does get the time to try that. It doesn't always succeed.
Very true.
But we will see a crazy turn at the end where Leroy does a whole bunch of damage, and the question is, will it be enough? The answer's often no, but there was a match in the Rat Race where Hunter Ace had lost his Velen, and Amnesiac was on 77 effective health if you count armor, and Hunter Ace still won because he got a Lyra. He got his Velen back off a Lyra Resurrect. Velen stuck on the board for 2 turns, and he just piled in the damage.
That is quite impressive. And I was going to say, I don't expect to see Lyra the Sunshard in this deck, but given that we've seen the Galaka Crawler already in there, in the eternal debate between Gadgetzan and Lyra, in the aggressive matchups, you would just rather have Lyra because it's a little bit cheaper, and the stats are slightly better to start wrestling back for the board.
So when would you have, say, the Gadgetzan instead of the Lyra, would you think?
Well, if you're expecting to see a lot of Jade Druid, a lot of the Mirror in particular, and a lot of Warlock, obviously the Control Warlock, you just want to be making sure you hit your combo of Raza and Anduin as consistently and as as quickly as you can.
So what you're saying there is it basically split down the line of the decks we're expecting to see. So
Very good
we'll
point,
probably
yeah.
see some people bring one, some people bring the other. Maybe some people bring both.
That has been done before. Yep, you sometimes see it. And I think I saw a couple with neither, and Harrison was kind of replacing that mid-range draw option, but I don't expect to see that.
The thing is, with Highlander Priest, I mean, there's a lot of people that dislike it, right? Because it's so powerful.
Because they hate losing.
But it keeps evolving, but in very small ways. You will see these 1 or 2 cards change. I think it was Zalay who put Rathion in his deck lately just to get that extra card draw, and it's decent in the mirror. And that excites me. I like the fact you can just find one card that hasn't been used in a while just because it might help in a matchup that fits the meta.
I mean, I love watching Priest versus Priest mirrors. I'm the only one in the world who does, I think. But there's so much going on. The problem is, if one of the players is playing worse but goes turn 5 Raza, turn 8 Anduin, all that nuance is lost. But there is a lot going on in this Highlander Priest deck. Because in the old Warrior controls games, you'd assign your 2 removal spells to their 2, whatever. But in a Highlander deck, if you sort of have to use a card creatively, you've lost that card for the whole game. And a lot of these games do go that entire distance, so every card does matter.
And so Leroy here showing knowledge of which cards are important to keep for the super late game and which ones aren't, because it's a real art as to which cards you want later on, because in the Raza Priest mirror, Priest of the Feast is very, very important later on to buy you just that 1 extra turn to deliver your own lethal damage against their own barrage of hero powers. But in this one, your health total probably isn't going to be mattering, because if you're going to die, you're going to die by like 20 damage overkill, because there'll be a huge board of Jades.
Yep, so try and get any damage you can through at all in this matchup with your minions. I mean, already you can see how hard that's going to be, and the problem that Leroy is going to face here is there is no good Psychic Scream. You don't really want Deathsie to have 2 lots of Medivh in the whole course of this game.
It's true. That's a good point. And obviously shuffling back something like Aya to deny the Death Rattle is a double-edged sword, because then they can just play it again and you have to deal with it again. But I think it's usually worth shuffling back the high-value targets they really want to be playing just to get them out, because you're essentially killing them once, and if you have to deal with it later on down the line, that's a problem for another day.
And one thing the Priest can do in this with the Psychic Scream is save it again until, I keep talking about turn 20, just use your imagination that one of these turn 20s is before the other turn 20. Keep the Psychic Scream until the Jade finally gets all its big army, its 7/7s and 8/8s in this particular build. And then you Psychic Scream those, because they have to be played at full mana cost when they get drawn, and that buys you another turn. But another turn in Priest is like 3 more cards, it's not like 1 more card.
And so for Leroy, while this is looking kind of dire at the moment for him with no combo pieces and not much draw, he's basically 1 card away from making this insane. If he can pick up a Gadget Sand, he'll draw an insane amount of cards. If he can pick up a Wild Pyromancer, he'll draw a crazy amount of cards. A Northshire Cleric wouldn't be that bad. There's so many cards he can get to really start capitalizing on this hand, but it's just not available at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the problem. If you have to, the scenario I was setting up earlier where the Priest launches everything at the end, you've got to have everything left. If Deathsie can make Leroy actually use those cards up to do things, which, you know, that's what they're there for. But the idea is the Priest doesn't usually have to do things. But if Leroy has to start actually doing things with his cards, they're not there for the end of game launch.
And that's the thing, he can do things on this turn, for example. If he wanted to clear off Medivh, he could use Silence and he could use Potion of Madness, get rid of Medivh on this turn, and then he doesn't have to Psychic Scream it back in. But then all your card draw possibility later is just being thrown away there and then. And this matchup just slowly is going to get worse for HelloLeeroy. So he needs to choose at what point he is just going to bite the bullet and just try and combat the board, and that's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fascinating turn, actually, because, like you say, he's got options to just eat a load of damage for 1 turn. The Druid isn't going to burst you down. Yeah, he is. He's just going to eat the damage, try 1 more draw, 1 more pickup, see if he can get something to deal with this board that doesn't Psychic Scream now. Because if you Psychic Scream now and Deathsie drops a load of Jades, you've lost the game.
Yeah. This is such a stinky play. Like, Deathsie must know there's something up with what's coming from Leroy here. Like, just healing and passing with a hand of, what, 9 cards? There must be something he could have done. So he's got to be expecting a Psychic Scream.
Deathsie's nostrils are flaring.
They're flaring.
Fishy in the ESL studios.
And it's Leroy.
I didn't really want to call HelloLeeroy fishy, but I mean...
There's one word I would use to describe Leroy.
I'll have a whiff
It's
later.
a fishy ball. Right. Ooh. 5 if you can name that card.
Gaskin's pointing at me.
Wow.
I can't name any of the cards that are actually in decks, let alone ones that aren't.
It's Skerim Cultist. I'm going to... Final answer. Skerim Cultist.
Our survey says... I don't know.
No
if that's
idea.
Right. No
The
idea.
survey is 2 out of 3 casters. Can't name it, so can't possibly.
Sounds like those old adverts. 2 out of 3 casters could not. We're fine. So, Anduin off the top. Wrong one.
That's not bad. You can just scream now.
Now you have to.
And I mean, not literally, Leroy. Wearing soundproof headphones won't make any difference.
But again, just seeing even that one turn he delayed that scream has made a big difference to how much he got rid of.
And so Deathsie here, kind of in a weird spot because he wants to be saving a charge of Atiesh for the Ultimate Infestation now, obviously, on the next couple of turns. Because if he can get something like a Tyrantus, Deathwing Dragonlord, those are the really big, scary ones that the Priest very possibly just can't deal with for the moment. We're going to be using one charge of it here on the branching paths, and then very possibly going for a Plague or a Nourish on the second.
Yeah, and this is interesting to me as well because he doesn't use the armor. That's 12 armor that could have been used.
Very good point.
Later in the game that Leroy doesn't have to do. I'm not saying it was wrong, by the way. Drawing the cards when you've got no cards in hand is kind of important, but...
Actually, I think on the second choice, I would have preferred going for the armor because he's got the Nourish in hand now. And yeah, okay, maybe he has to use the last charge of the Atiesh on the Nourish, but whatever, you're drawing 3 more cards. You're so likely to have found either another Branching Paths or an Ultimate Infestation at that point. And the armor is so important in this matchup, especially when they clearly don't have Anduin on 8.
And this is where the people who play a lot of Hearthstone and regularly... as opposed, like Leroy, as opposed to Deathsie, who plays a lot less now than he used to, have got the advantage because they know what's going to happen on turn 20, whereas Deathsie may be playing for the short term a little bit too much.
I think he even tweeted out saying he hasn't been playing as much.
He hasn't played as much. He's enjoying it a lot more because he grew out of love with the game because he's playing it too much.
You can,
we can all do
just
that.
blow out. You can play too much of any game.
Exactly. And so Deathsie has taken a step back, and you can see that at least he's enjoying himself here. You know. We've seen players not do that because they put the pressure on themselves too much. He's avoided that problem.
Fiverr, if you can name that card.
Studded Golem.
Well, there we go. Hey, you're like a living Hearthstone dictionary.
That's probably wrong, to be honest. I just think.
Where are you going with that?
Yeah.
One of the players did hover over it, so I feel less bad. They were reading the text.
Right, there we go. I know it's got can't attack unless something, but I can't exactly remember what the...
Unless you're at the Prem.
Something dark side.
And so now for Leroy.
There's the script for Star Wars Episode 9.
I'd probably make a better film.
Wow. That's
let's not even go there.
Yes.
I really...
Have you not seen it yet?
What, episode 8?
8.
Okay, so here's the thing. I did fall asleep while watching it because I was really jet lagged, but I also really liked it.
I really liked it as well,
Yeah.
but Paradox is in it, so it made it awkward.
But now we found the Anduin here for Leroy. So he's looking to be in so much of a better spot. Only 37 health and very low amounts of armor gain left for Deathsie. So he can just start firing off all this stuff. I don't see any way that Leroy doesn't win this game now, unless it's just sheer damage killing him over the next turn or two.
37 health only. I like the phrase you use there. Just casually, only 37.
Does he use a potion here or not? You could use it if you really wanted to. I guess it's not necessary.
You try to use as little as possible until your Venom hits the table.
Yeah.
It's just wasting 2 in theory. And that's what Leroy's doing very well in this game. He did it very well on the pre-Psychic Scream turn. We use the phrase a lot, but this is exactly what it means. He's using his health total as a resource.
Absolutely. He knows there's no way of dying, and he also knows on the following turn, he can just explode. Like, there's so much damage coming out here.
So Deathsie carrying that dynamite might be the one that actually explodes rather than Leroy.
Like that dungeon run guy, Ham.
Yeah.
Ham.
He's going ham.
He's going ham. That's what I was looking for.
You were trying to set me up, and I just didn't know what for.
So
yeah, that's exactly what I was
Does he have... If I'm calculating correct, he has around 40?
I think he's got even more than that.
I think he's got a million, honestly.
He's so much overkill here. It's ridiculous. Because he just goes Velen, Radiant, Mind Blast, Holy Smite, and then 4 extra spells on top of that. That's like
44.
50 damage. I think that's like that's about 50.
There's loads though. I'm not even going to count it. There's more than 38.
And that means HelloLeeroy is going to be able to take a 3-0 sweep against Deathsie, the top seed coming into this tournament. We were all asking the question, can Deathsie continue his fine form from the online stages? But HelloLeeroy has proved the critics wrong. He has finally, at the live finals, been able to win a game, and he will move on to winner's bracket round 2.
But it's not goodbye Deathsie just yet, even though it's HelloLeeroy, because it is double elimination.
That is right, and I think in this particular one, Leroy definitely deserved to be taking the win. I liked his play a lot, playing very nicely around all the possible outs the Druid could have had against his Rogue. In this particular one, he just, he got the high amount of draw that was needed of him and then delivered the ridiculous amount of burst that was available to him.
You can see he's still going to end up winning this with Deathsie on -3 and at least 8 more available damage.
Exactly. But the most interesting thing here is Deathsie, obviously, as you said, managed to keep a fair amount of information secret.